this is actually a first for us here on the podcast. This is the first time we've had somebody join us on the pod who is not a current player. And I don't think that we could have anybody more special than Mary Carillo joining us. And Mary is down in Naples. And Mary, I guess I want to start. How does one become a good tennis broadcaster? I've got no.
You're asking me.
I was just going to say how excited I am to have one on board this time.
That's actually an interesting question, and I don't know. Personally, I remember when I first started doing TV, I had been coached from childhood from the late great Harry Hopman, and he was my entire audience. I just wanted Mr. Hopman to know that I knew my onions, you know. Like I felt like that was who I was trying to. I wanted his respect, and obviously it grew from there. But I wanted that. What does it take? I mean, I think a lot of it is, and you have the same thing. We love our jobs. We love being passionate about a sport and trying to dig deep into it and tell stories. I mean, I think the bet for me, it's all about storytelling. And so everything is, for me, is about, from cave paintings to Egyptian pyramids. I mean, storytellers have been around for a long while, and there's a reason. It's compelling, and it's important, and it's interesting, and it's creative, and so that basically, I think, is the answer to anybody who's trying to tell a good story, especially in sports. Yeah.
And for you, talking about the transition from your actually professional playing career to broadcasting and commentary, because again, Mike never had the playing side of things, so I'm new to this transition period.
Yeah, I found it pretty easy. I mean, my knees were shot. I mean, even I had my first knee surgery in high school. I had 3 more, so I was riding on rims from an early age, and I knew I had a very short period of time where I could actually play professional tennis. That's why I didn't go to college. I knew 4 years of hardcore tennis was just gonna, that would be even worse. So I loved it, and I traveled. I mean, in the few years I played at a great time, late 70s, Jimmy and John and Chrissy and Martina. And then I had I had everybody since, the entire Pete Sampras and Agassiz and Celis and Groff. I mean, you just continue to, as you age out, and Mike, I'll bet you feel the same way. As you get older, you feel like you actually have to work harder. Because these are people you didn't play against them. You don't know them. You have to talk to their coaches and go to their press conferences and watch what they're practicing, right? And so it becomes a whole different thing. But I also learned a lot. I got to work early on with the late great Bud Collins, and that guy, he was. I mean, apart from being a terrific journalist and historian, he was playful about it. You can hear the smile in his voice when he was on TV, even when he typed, you knew the guy was doing just what he wanted to do and telling a good story. And so I think that has helped me. I mean, I've been doing this for over 40 years now. I'm elderly. In my dotage, I find that you have to work even harder.
Yes.
To know these people,
it's hard to relate to a younger audience. I mean, I'm lucky that I get to actually spend time with Noah on the road. And so he's allowed me to be in some of those, hotel rooms where I can actually interact with people other than just him. And I'm very, very lucky in that regard, but it's so hard to relate.
Well, that's why I listen to your podcasts all the time. I like listening to, that's how I keep up with that level of play with those players, with those young players coming up. That's how I keep up, because I'm not around those challengers. I'm not around, So it takes some work, right? It takes, and somebody's playing. Leila Fernandez and Emma Raducanu have made their way into the last weekend of the US Open. And, all of a sudden before, the first week is over, I'm watching YouTube. I'm saying, wait, why are they winning? What do they do? What are the patterns they really enjoy creating? That's what you end up doing, right? Like, wait a minute. I don't even know how to pronounce this dude's name.
Right.
And neither does anybody else I'm I'm working.
Yeah.
Why don't we all decide on the official English corruption of this name right now in this production meeting?
Yeah.
Let's just get it wrong, but we'll do it collectively. Right? Haven't you had those days?
Yes, I've had those.
Dude, every conversation I have with Mike, he changes the pronunciation of the name. He's like, "That's not how you do it, Noah.
Yeah,
And
no.
that's not how you do it." I was like,
Yeah.
"I know these guys for 10 years. Are you sure?"
That's
Well,
exactly right.
Did want to bring you on in a more serious realm, because we have been struggling with how to talk about the allegations against Sasha Zverev. And the reporting came out this weekend that you had resigned from your post with the Laver Cup because you didn't feel quite comfortable with it. And there's a little bit of inside baseball in terms of who hires whom in terms of commentators, and whether you're working for a ESPN tennis channel or an inside entity, a world feed type of situation. I guess if you could just walk us through that side, and as well as your decision on why you wanted to step away from the Laver Cup.
I will tell you everything, guys, but I'm very interested to know, Mike, how you would have handled Laver Cup if you were calling it, and Noah, how much locker room talk there is about Alexander Zverev.
Wow, the podcast role has turned.
Yeah, I was gonna say, not quite the same as when we have tennis players on, is it?
No.
I'm really curious from both of you.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this. I actually dreamed about our talk last night, because for me, Mary, I will be blunt, I couldn't do what you did. Maybe this is me and some of my insecurities, but I feel like I'm rather dispensable if I get let go because I make a decision to talk about these allegations. It's not a big deal. There's not going to be a big, oh my God, what happened to Mike Cation? I think you have that name and that notoriety.
We're all dispensable, I'll tell you that.
I know, but I felt even at the US Open, I didn't feel like it was my place to talk about it because I am a little bit lower level in terms of the broadcasting side. So I feel a little bit more timid and scared to talk about it. And that's really hard to come to grips with.
No, I get that. And Noah, is it? I mean, it was certainly locker room talk on the women's side. What about with you guys?
It's there. Obviously, I think we dealt with the initial one with Nicolas Basilashvili was kind of the first story that was coming out at the time, and then to have Sasha Zverev and so much of that situation around the Paris Masters at that time, between both of his ex-girlfriends, with the custody of his first child and everything. People are scared. I think people are scared to talk about it. I think having somebody at the top of the sport acting out in this way, in this regard, allegations or not, it's a difficult situation. I feel like everybody shied away from it. I feel everybody turned their back on the situation. I wanted, regardless almost of the side you're on, and that's a tough thing to say, but I wanted conversation. That's how we talk about mental health. I wanted that conversation, and that wasn't there. It is in the smaller groups that we have, within myself, with the friendships, it happens constantly. Talking about the fact that he went through all of that, regardless of what side you're on, and the fact that he played that well during the Paris Masters is beyond me. I mean, these are things, otherworldly to have those kind of situations going on. And like I said, the conversations are not taking place enough. And this is why we're here right now. And the Laver Cup is going on, and people aren't really talking about it, besides a few people that got blocked on Twitter because, a few remarks took place. But it's extremely disappointing and kind of, obviously this is extremely severe, but it's happened many, many times on lower levels throughout, my history in tennis.
Interesting. Well, I'll tell you, first of all, guys, I was not told that I couldn't speak about Zverev at Laver Cup. That conversation did not happen. And I went to the Laver Cup a couple of years ago in Geneva. I loved it. I loved the event. I was the MC for the gala.
Wow.
The pay wasn't good, but I wanted to, because I had heard so many good things about it. It looked amazing on TV, the pageantry of it and the staging of it, the presentation, the black cord and the lights, and oh my God, it just looked great. So I took the work with Tennis Australia, and I loved it. And obviously the Zverev stuff didn't come out till much later, but I thought it was fun. I thought the players really did care
Yes.
about their teams. But even then, even a couple of years ago, I think Tennis Australia I think it's pretty well known that it's a blue sky network.
Yeah.
You work for them and you're supposed to, it's kind of a corporate deal, and which I didn't understand, honestly, till I got there. This is Geneva a couple of years ago. I made a comment that I thought, it's the kind of stuff I say all the time. Kyrgios was playing great and the crowd was eating the dude up, and he was playing to them and he was hitting crazy ass shots, and he loves playing with Jack Sock and he loved the team. And I said, this is a perfect outlet for him.
Yeah.
Because he's not fit enough to go 3 out of 5. He can't win majors, but look at this. This is, and I got spoken to about that. I thought it was pretty innocuous and I thought it was obvious. And by the way, if you said to Nick Kyrgios, are you fit enough to win a major? I don't think he'd argue. Like, no, he kind of almost takes this crazy pride in the fact that he doesn't work hard. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I kind of had I got the sense back then that this was a very, and believe me, I've had my issues at ESPN, at Tennis Channel many times. Can't we just commit a little journalism, just for the hell of it? And I lost almost every battle. But what happened with the Laver Cup specifically was I was getting a lot of emails. There were group emails and WhatsApp, chat and all that. This was early last week. And I was getting a lot of them from one specific person, the executive producer. And finally, I wrote back to her. I said, hey, how are we handling the Alexander Zverev allegations?
Yeah.
Because obviously, one of the gravest of the allegations happened at Laver Cup in Geneva. And this woman who had been writing me back a lot, and she even apologized to our group, sorry for all these emails, but they'll calm down in a couple of days.
Yeah.
It was all about quarantining and this and that and credential. Where do you pick up your credential? What shoe size are you? Who's coming to the gala? Like, it just kept coming. And all of a sudden I write that and nothing. Everything goes dark. Like a day goes by, 2 days. Finally, she sets me up, and this was an off the record conversation, so I won't tell you who it was with, but the essence of this conversation, she put me in charge. She put me in touch with one of the big Laver Cup guys, one of the muckety mucks. And I had a long conversation with him about my hesitance. Like, wait a minute, apart from the fact that I wasn't sure how hamstrung I would be by Tennis Australia. I also know that in every single match I've called that involved Alexander Zverev, from his French Open run to his Olympics gold to his US Open, the semi, I talked about it in every single match.
Yeah.
And more often than not, whoever was sitting next to me didn't pick up on it.
Yeah.
I was alone. I was twisting in the wind with this stuff. And I'm kind of used to that. And I'm okay with that in large measure, but I didn't want it to happen at a 3-day exhibition where Zverev is being hailed as the biggest star there, the highest ranking guy there. So anyway, I had this conversation, which was long, and he let me air out. And I told him, like, wait a minute. So one of your guys, Zverev called one of you guys, a Laver Cup guy. Like, didn't he call a doctor? He had intervened on a suicide attempt. I had all those obvious questions. What? Well, I wasn't there. He said that a couple of times, and that's when I knew, this isn't going to happen too well for me. And we follow the ATP protocols, and I'm there like, what protocols? Right. And if you truly follow the letter of the ATP law as it exists, this happened during a tournament. It happened in a hotel on site. So that's part of we go by the ATP rankings. Well, what's Nick Kyrgios ranked?
Right.
It just got to, and he was very nice. And in fact, he told me how much he respected me, and he remembered how much I loved the one in Geneva.
Yeah.
And at that point I realized, it's better that I just back out. And I hadn't signed my contract yet, so that probably made it a little bit easier all around. But I just thought, what am I, this? And by the way, maybe it was discussed. I didn't watch any of the Laver Cup, so I don't know how much they went into it and who handled it or who didn't. But And then he called me back. Again, this is a very nice man. I remember meeting him in Geneva, and he called me back like 5 minutes later and said, "Hey, give it a day before you decide." He genuinely like wanted me to come.
Yeah.
Which I thought was classy of him, because I had already told him, and he probably knew of how critical I've been of Laver Cup, of the ATP, of the fact that they're like, I've been, of Zverev. I mean, whether I believe Olya,
I do
I
too.
mean, I believe her. Why would she say all this stuff?
And also
I don't.
the article by Ben is really well researched.
Ben did a hell of a job. It all got fact checked.
Yes.
And he put himself out there. And I kind of felt, for a long while, I kind of felt like, that's why I gave Ben that quote. And I wasn't going to, he had known that I had pulled out of it earlier in the week, but, I was going to, I don't want to make a big deal of this. Who cares if I'm there or not? But I gave him that quote and I said, all right, now there's two of us. And it doesn't look, it went on, and it was, hopefully it was a success, but I just feel like what we say or don't say shapes opinion. I mean, that's what, and especially, I don't know, Mike, if you feel this way as well, but I know for me, like when I first got into this gig, there were a lot of Americans to talk about.
Yeah.
And it was easy to talk about them, and you knew them, and you knew they come from a tennis family. But now, like, all these players are from all over the planet.
Right.
And so you have to try to tell people who they are.
Right.
And what they believe in, and what they, and so that sort of has made it, calling tennis, much more interesting in recent years too. You really gotta get in there, So anyway, I'm sure they did fine without me. I'm sure the event was well received. And again, I mean, the biggest single reason I pulled away is because I knew that whatever vibe they were trying to create, I was gonna trot on that. And I don't know, like, let me ask you this. If you, Noah, or Mike, if you were calling a Sasha Zverev match, at what point in the match do you even have that conversation?
Right.
Do you do it as they're warming up? Do you do it? Do you make a studio segment out of it? Do you do it a couple of games? When do you explain? And for the most part, I mean, most people in our business don't explain it at all.
Right.
But again, what you don't say is as important as what you say, don't you think?
For me, I know that I was going to say it's a studio segment for me, because then you can actually spend time.
Correct.
You're not interrupted by an incredible running forehand down
Correct.
the line, break point down. You put a 5-minute segment together at the beginning, or maybe you show it at the set break.
Yep.
Something along those lines. And then that gives good, ample time and an actual thoughtful discussion. And then you can move on from there.
I think.
Well, how would you answer that?
Yeah, I think being in this world for very limited time compared to you two, I think you have to play devil's advocate all the time. So the understanding that you're doing this during this match, do you really want the negative feedback that you're trying to take away from the event? Do you want any negative
Correct.
feedback at all to take away from the message that you're trying to convey? And that's kind of my issue when I look at that, is you have to play the other side and be like, what is the safest environment to kind of share this knowledge and share my passion behind this, where people are just like, well, I want to watch tennis. Well, no, there's more to this right now. There's a lot more going into it. And you bring up the idea of who cares about Mary Carillo not doing it. And I think goes into a deeper topic of, where do the responsibilities lie? With Federer, where do the responsibilities lie?
Absolutely.
With the other players? Yeah.
These people have daughters. That's the part.
Yes.
This is that was my struggle all last week. These people have kids. These people have little girls. Like, wait, how do you not throw that in? How do you not weigh that in your decision making? And this is, again, it's different from, they could have invited anybody to play in this thing. These are handpicked people.
That's the disappointing part to me, to be honest with you, Mary, is that I found myself, when we were having some discussions amongst commentators at the Open, as we were talking about how we wanted to approach it, I found myself, you asked me earlier how I was handling it. I felt like I said, I couldn't discuss the allegations, but what I wasn't going to do is celebrate him. I was going to honor the tennis that I saw that was in front of me.
He's playing great tennis. You're right.
Playing great tennis, but I wasn't going to celebrate and make a big deal of, look at him, what a great man, great sportsman, because that felt artificial to me. And that's why him being at the Laver Cup, again, where some of these things happened, it hurt. It just really was a struggle for me.
I'll tell you this, Mike. At the Olympics, I was in Tokyo. The rest of the Olympic team, we had Trenny Kuzneric was doing the courtside interview, so she was in Tokyo with me. Everybody else was at the Telemundo studio, Miami.
Yeah.
So it's Brad Gilbert and Chanda and Darren Cahill and Renee Stubb. Like they were all over there. And now Zverev beats Federer. I call that match. Now he's playing the gold medal match. So the night before the gold medal match, I wrote a long, detailed email about how I had already read Ben's second article that came out in Slate. He'd already allowed me to read it.
Yeah.
I had asked him if I could read it during the Olympics because I knew Zverev was playing great. And I knew I was going to have to discuss his guy, you know? So anyway, I wrote this email to the producers and all the fellow announcers, and I said, look, we can't god him up. we have to discuss. Yeah, he's playing well in spite of all this. And here's what I know from the upcoming slate, and here's what I know from the first one. And I believe Olya, and I believe Ben's reporting. And we have to do a studio segment before the gold medal match, so Darren and I don't have to be talking about it during the gold medal match, because not only is that not fair to Zverev, it's not fair to the guy who's playing, right? It's not fair to Khachanov. But wait a minute, we're discussing a very complicated issue. So they kicked it up to a muckety muck at NBC, who agreed with me and said, yes, we will do a studio segment. Next day comes around, and it's a couple of minutes before they're walking down the court. And there's a studio segment going on. It has nothing to do with these allegations, nothing. It's all about X's and O's, and it's, you know, Brad and the host, and Darren is up at and I'm thinking, they're walking on the, like, what happened to this thing that was supposed to happen that everyone seemed to have agreed to? Didn't happen. So I was furious, and I'm texting like, what the hell happened to the? Because now I knew that I'm gonna have to mop up, you know. Yeah. And so then one of the producers wrote back and said, we'll do a studio segment after the first set. After the first set, this really toothless studio segment happens.
Yeah.
And I'm there like, wait, is that it? Is that was that it?
Yeah.
And God bless Darren Cahill, because I jumped right in the beginning of the second set. I had to say something. That wasn't even close to what had to be said, in my opinion. And Brad jumped in, and he agreed. And he said the ATP has a, you know, and we both like excoriated the ATP for, you know. Anyway, and then the match went on, and then the rest of the match was like, Jesus, this guy's playing like, this is clearly his safe haven, because he's never played better tennis than he's playing.
Great.
And the rest of the match, I didn't have to mention again, but that kind of stuff happens all the time, at least to me. And I lose work over it.
And I wanted to ask you about that, because like I said, for me, it makes me nervous about the idea of losing work. And if I lose work, you know, I'm going to be, I have another 25 years to of employment before I can retire, right? So I'll be working at Best Buy down the street here before too long. And I guess, how do you reconcile your need for integrity right now? And I respect it immensely, and the honesty and the journalism. How do you deal with that? And how are you able to overcome just that job security issue?
I've been at it, you know, I turned 65 next March. I mean, I'm elderly, you know, so in my dotage, I think I've been able to, I mean, I've made some money, I've saved some money, I'm not at the same stage as a lot of people. And a lot of people, frankly, they like the lifestyle that tennis television provides. They like being on the road. They like, you know, I've got a granddaughter now. I like being home. I like playing with this little kid, you know. So I'm at a different stage, but honestly, I'll give you a casual example. I mean, this has been going on for years.
Right.
Tennis Sandgren had that great run at the Australian Open years ago, right?
Yep.
So I'm working for Tennis Channel, and now he's in the quarters, and I'm doing that match.
Yeah.
And so I said to my producer, and we're not live, ESPN's live, so we've got 8 hours of coverage on tape. So I said, look, we have to handle, it was what tennis, all of a sudden Tennis Sandgren, people were trying to figure out who he is. So we all go on social media and we all read his Twitter and we all see the stuff he tweets and retweets. And, so this guy has very strong political opinions. And it was causing a lot of blowback to him. And I said, well, let me do this. Let's build a couple of panels of the stuff that he has said, the stuff he's reached, why this has become such a firestorm. And at the beginning of the third game, we'll come back early. We won't take that commercial, whatever. And I'll discuss why this thing has happened. And my producer agreed. And then the next day, his name is Ross Schneiderman. Ross and John Wertheim, who's a journalist.
Yeah.
I were at breakfast up at the top floor of the hotel we were staying at in Melbourne. And I said, all right, so look, I picked out the panels I think we should build. And my producer says, we're not doing that. I said, well, what do you mean? I said, how are we doing? He said, no, we're just not doing it. Just verbal it. I hate that. Because if you have production values, if you're trying to make a point,
Yes.
if you have it means that you're just not out there,
on an island by yourself.
And it usually means that there's going to be some participation from the guy or the woman sitting next to you, right? So no, we're just not going to do it. I'm furious. I said, we got to. He said, well, what if Federer was playing that night? Well, what if the Federer match goes 5 hours? I'm asking for a minute, 2 minutes. Right. I think we're okay, So anyway, he didn't agree with me. So I said, well, take me off that match, put me on something else. And he didn't. He said, no, I'm not putting you on. This is. And so I said, well, then I'm not working today. Don't pay me. I'm not. And that's what happened. I didn't work the match because I didn't want to call that match in the way that they wanted me to call it. So I worked the next day and I said, look, I'll do anything. I'll sweep up the production office if you want, but don't make me compromise what needs to be said journalistically. So anyway, this has been going, I can name dozens of instances like that. And so what it comes down to, I think, in the end is, what do you say no to? I judge people by what they say no to. And then you pay the price. I've been in every penalty box. I'll do my time. And then I feel better about myself coming out of the penalty box than if I never went in.
We always try to correlate it back to some deeper issues in tennis here. And I always, it's like the white picket fence that tennis tries to be pristine. And we always, we're a star-studded sport, Obviously, we did have Basilashvili. It wasn't nearly at the top of the sport as Zverev was, but how would we have handled the situation if he was 80 in the world? Would we have cared? Would we have, maybe just thrown him to the side again and say, hey, we can take him down because he's 80, but he's the next coming, let's say, of tennis greats. We have to leave him up there. Is that, do we see that every time, I
wish we didn't. I mean, and look, other sports have gotten they've gotten much more harsh about domestic violence. There are genuine rules, and you get suspended for a certain number of games, or you don't even get put on the team. I mean, we could do a much better job, don't you? I mean, much better, and it shouldn't matter. It's even more important, I think, if someone famous goes unpunished. It's even more important because you're basically saying, "Oh, well, that's he's 4 in the world, so what are you going to do?" And that's. Anyway, everyone's got their own, as I said, everyone how far are you going to bend your spine before it snaps back? Or maybe it doesn't, maybe your spine breaks and you just end up doing like John Wertheim after that, when he found, he was there when I said, well, then I won't work today. Mm-hmm. And Wertheim said to me, is that really, you're going to die on that hill? Like Tennis Sandgren? John wouldn't have, maybe and that's fine. Everyone's got their own sense of the moment and of what do you say no to? And that's just something I said no to. So.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought because I will be blunt with you. I'm struggling with that. It has been, I was lucky enough to call Zverev Djokovic the semifinal at the Open, and that was for me, on my personal, to-do list to be able to call a semifinal like that. And I sat there beforehand and I couldn't come to grips with it. And it still hurts.
I
And
know
so
how
it's-
excited you were about that.
Yeah,
Mike.
it was a big deal.
But again, like again, I just keep going back to the fact that the fans, the viewer, they're getting their information from us.
Right.
You know, that's like, if people are screaming, thousands of fans are screaming for an athlete or anybody that has done wrong, like that, I don't know, man, that really pulls me up. Like, wow, that's, don't they know? Should they know? How much should you know? Like, then you go into all of that. Like, wait a minute, what? And who the hell am I to, So anyway, I want to make it clear that it's not like Laver Cup said you can't talk about it.
Right.
That wasn't the conversation at all. That was
Right.
strictly my decision. I don't think they're going to be asking me back to London next year, which is too bad. Nice city.
Yeah.
And I've had some laughs there. But that's just kind of, that's just how it goes.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here?
In terms of who? In terms of what?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a lot of damage has been done, and it seems like the people that have taken their stance, and things aren't, are going the way they're supposed to be going in terms of, if you're going in one direction, you're going there. It doesn't seem like anybody's making any U-turns anytime soon. So what are the next steps?
Yeah, well, that's my problem. Like, wow, I don't want to be a part of the silence. I mean, that if you're quiet, it suggests you're complicit. You're going along with something, and I just don't think that should keep going on. I think that there wasn't a real investigation in Geneva. It's crazy to me. Wait, you didn't want to make sure she was okay? You didn't want to call a doctor up there? I mean, this was serious stuff. She injected herself with insulin. I mean, clearly, apart from everything else, she clearly was in a mental state that should have been addressed, And as I said, whatever they think about Ben Rothenberg as a writer, as a journalist, I think he's very good. I like him. I believe Olya.
I think that's a perfect way to end it here, because I think in Noah and I, the way we've talked about it, personally, I think both of us are on that same side, and yet we have clearly struggled to figure out how we can best approach it and talk about it and deal with it. And that's why we wanted to bring you on, because you are somebody who I think both of us admire for your conviction and your journalistic tendencies. And it's something, quite frankly, I aspire to and hope to get to myself personally at some point.
Guys, as I said, I really like your pod. So I was very happy to say yes to you too.
Well, Mary, thank you so much. And I do hope that maybe we run into each other sometime sooner than New York next year.
Other than the sniper section of the U.S. Open Ash Stadium. That would be nice. We could blow the suds off a couple. And
I would really like to do that. All too much. Mary, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
No,
pleasure,
thank
guys.
you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.